Welcome back. You're still watching the Daily Debate and continue our talk maybe about the inauguration of a number of power plants in Egypt, important milestones in the sphere of energy. And for that, we're joined with the former director of the Electricity Regulatory Agency, Dr. Hafiz Al-Salmawi. I'd like to thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.
But before we jump into the power plants, we were just discussing, before the break about women in energy, and that's a good bridge, between, we were just speaking about the importance of women in the society, as the former ambassador and minister has mentioned. But at the same time, you told me there is a global movement about the women in energy. Let's hear from you a little bit about that, some background.
Yes. Actually, Women in Energy, it's a movement which is being supported by the International Confederation for Energy Regulators, which aiming to support much more involvement of women in energy activities. Actually, Egypt has a very good stand in this branch. Actually, we have one of the best women I have known in the energy sector. She was a vice chairman of the holding company for electricity, experience, determination. Currently, there is another vice chairman for electricity, is a woman. The first undersecretary for Ministry of Electricity is a woman. Ambassador Mushir Al-Khattab basically was a member of the board of the Electricity Regulatory Agency, and she contributed a lot in the development on issuing of the electricity law. So yes. Women has a lot of contribution in Egypt for the energy sector. I just talk about electricity, not talking about oil and gas, where I already met some excellent women working in this field. So I believe Egypt has a very good stand for women and contribution for the energy sector at large.
That's a very good opening, mentioning that the International Day for Women, it's not a special day, but we're celebrating this week, for the importance, and we were just mentioning, the empowerment of the woman in the society, given the experience, like you mentioned, contributing to energy laws and a lot of important issues is something definitely worth to look at. But let's move maybe to, there has been a number of power plants, and maybe one of the power plants is the combined cycle power plant that is next to the new capital or the administrative capital. So there has been a number of projects. So if you can give us a background about what was the projects that are going on now in Egypt, to support the energy sources?
Actually, I could say that the energy sector in Egypt, electricity sector in specific, is passing through a kind of revolution within the sector itself. All of us remember that there was a power cut, there was a shortage some years ago.
Yes.
And this shortage basically was contributed to two parts. First, that we have suffered from shortage in fuel supply, as well as a capacity, available capacity for power generation. Regarding fuel supply, actually the government succeeded to import natural gas. We wasn't prepared to have this, but it was done on a very short term. So we have a facility in Line Sokhna and we import, so we bridged the shortage of the natural gas. And now we have very promising future regarding new discoveries for natural gas, which is hopefully become online very soon, maybe by the end of this year. And this will give a very good boost.
New natural gas
New natural gas resources. All of us remember or know
the announcements, yes.
North of Alexandria, Atul, many others gas fields. On the capacity field, actually, in 2015, a fast-track plan has been conducted where by this year only, 6,600 megawatt was, maybe 800 megawatt was added in 1 year. This is including the normal expansion plan, which some of them was a delayed project because of the turbulence which the country was passing through, as well 3,600 megawatt, which is a fast-track plan. So this has basically helped very much in recovering such a condition which was suffering from. Parallel to this, for a long term or a longer term agreement, which you are mentioning now, for a much larger scale expansion plan, which include 3 plants you are mentioning one in Banis Wave, one in the new capital, and third one in El Brolos, where 4.8 giga for each plant with a total of 14.4 gigawatt of a capacity, which has unprecedented capacity, which is being added in that short time. And even for each plant itself is considered like a benchmark international. This is one of the largest capacities being installed in one place. So we have three of them in three cities, which is taking place.
And the speed of establishing those power plants is amazing.
I think the speed or the credit for this speed could go for three parties. First party, for sure, the supplier company, which is really, because the project is being implemented based on APC and finance, which is basically mobilizing finance. Second goes for the Egyptian subcontractor who works with this
hand in hand with the supplier.
Sure. And it's very much important to mention that Egypt government, represented by Ministry of Electricity, Electricity Holding Company, enable the lands, enable the infrastructure facility, getting all permissions, paying money for installments for these plants. So mobilizing all these resources, because if this was delayed, even if the supplier was ready to do it, he couldn't do it in that time. So credit should go for these three parties.
So let's first speak about, this concept, which is the latest technology of combined cycles. And as I understand, it uses the gas and the steam of the gas to get more energy, and that's almost gets like 50% energy more from this combined cycle together. So if you can explain to us, the importance, and maybe how is this, is it like the latest technology trends in power plants? Is Egypt moving with the normal trends, or is it beyond the patterns?
Actually, combined cycle technology is a well-known technology. But the new things, combined cycle in general has advantages in it's very efficient compared to traditional power generation plants, which is using steam generation. Normally, when you say steam generating plants, it has an efficiency of around 42, 44, 45, such as supercritical, which is a recent plant, also is being built in parallel to the combined cycle, because it has an advantage in responding to the load. So other technical advantages, which is needed as a part of the pool. But also combined cycle has advantages being very efficient, so you could generate more electricity with less fuels. For this new plant, actually it has latest technology. The latest technology regarding the gas turbine, actually a combined cycle power plant is composed of two sections. The first section is a gas turbine unit, and then you use the exhaust which is coming out for this gas turbine unit to generate more electricity from a steam section. So for the gas turbine sections, it's one of the largest. They call it Frame F, which is a kind of a design which is the first time being used here in Egypt. And the size itself for 100 megawatt per unit, which is unprecedented size. It's a benchmark internationally, even I say. And then the efficiency of the total plant is close to 60%. So we remember we're talking about mid-40s. Now we talk about 60% efficiency, which means that at least you have 30% saving in a fuel compared to traditional steam plants. So this is reserve the resources, less emission, which is very much importantly, and normally combined cycle power plant using gas, and gas is considered as a clean fuel. So it's also contribute for environment, both in two sides, using clean fuel in a principle, and then using it efficiently, so less emission even with this clean fuel.
Yes, very interesting. So those three locations, why in specific those three locations were selected? The one next to the new capital is quite obvious. What about the rest?
No, actually, some of the sites was all ready for receiving some of the plants. This is very much. But also selection for a site of a plant is being taken into consideration several parameters. One of them, the plant should be close to the load centers. So as you mentioned, for the new capital, we expect that a load center will be created in that site. So it's very much important to have a plant as close as much as possible, because Now we have a network, so you could allocate the plant anywhere in Egypt to supply any load. But as you put the plant as too far from the load, it means that electricity will be transmitted for a long distance, which is mean more losses. So
less efficiency.
It's normally being selected as close to the load. So this is for an efficiency region. Also, should very much be accessible to infrastructure. Roads, you couldn't build a plant unless you have an access to the site, you have a water supply in the site, and also the transmission system. You should select the plant where you have a capacity to interconnect this plant to the normal transmission system. So this site was being selected for also normally, according to the environment law, normally we have what we call it environmental impact assessment study. So the plant should be not very much close to the inhabited areas. So normally several parameters, availability for cooling water, so several parameters normally being considered in selecting the plant site. So this is how sites has been selected.
Yes, interesting. So you mentioned, more than 14 gigas. So if you can explain to the viewers, what would a giga mean for, how many inhabitants, how many houses, how many energy to cover, how many
houses,
space?
too many houses. Actually, we couldn't measure it by houses because basically, for example, we now generate around 180 terawatt hours. Just to understand the terawatt, what mean a terawatt is a million of kilowatts hour. So it's a very big number, by the way. Actually, if we consider that we have around 30 million residential customer which is being served. It means that 30 million families which is being served. We have around 200,000 industrial and economical facilities which is being served. We have 1.6 million shops which is being served with electricity. We have a lot of utilities like water treatment, sanitary, public lighting. So electricity is being used for many, many different applications. So we are very much in need for energy, for electricity and specifically for industry, for livelihood, for many other facilities in our daily life. And our needs is continuously increasing, either for investment and improving our production and competitiveness, secondary for improving our life standards, and also we are passing through a period where we have an urbanization. Many people now are moving to live in cities more than being in a countryside. Their consumption pattern and lifestyle is being changed. They are relying more and more on modern equipment and appliances, and they need more electricity. Also for health care. We couldn't now think that a healthcare could take place without availability of electricity. So electricity is very much needed. 14.4 gigawatts representing around 45% increase in our current capacity. We have now 35,000 megawatt, which is a lot, but this 14 will make it close to 50. So we have 45% increase. Just to imagine, now, as we reach 50, we will be equivalent to Italy, to Spain. Italy have a peak demand of 54 gigawatt. Spain is sometimes is the same order. Half of France, for example. So we're becoming one of the largest utility in Africa. South Africa was 40 gigawatts. They was in front of us. Now we will exceed South Africa. Yes. So we will become one of the largest utility. And I would say that we are now ranked around 28, the largest utility in the world. I believe we might move around to the 20s, the largest utilities in the world. So this is a very huge.
Of course, and we're seeing on the screen the German Chancellor with the Egyptian President inaugurating these, this mega power plants in Egypt. And like you mentioned, 45%. This is a huge number when we say, as an increase.
Yes, but the inauguration is for the first phase.
Yes,
actually,
not for the full.
Yes, full project will be commissioned by March or May 2018. So next year, the full 14.4 gigawatt, which is unprecedented time schedule for implementing such huge capacity.
That's quite obvious. And not only that, there has been also a lot of advancement in the part of how the consumer can sell to the main network some electricity through the solar power. And that's a trend that we really need to advocate, because it will help a lot, help people, and help also to reduce the leverage and the use of electricity and energy in general in Egypt.
Actually, nowadays now a new term has been come out, which is called prosumer. Prosumers means that producer and consumer at the same time. So prosumers now become almost like a fact where most of the households now have their top roof systems where they can sell to the grid as well as they consume from the grid. And this has helped very much in improving the reliability of the power system. It's also make a kind of a partnership between a consumer and the suppliers, because before suppliers would normally supply and get money back. Now money goes to waste as well as energy goes to waste. So this is very much advanced, and new technologies enable us, and the trend now for the future network has become what we call it smart grid. Smart grid will enable much more kind of exchange of this capacity, and some of consumer could produce and feed others, and so basically everybody is contributing to the system now. And the grid will consider like a pool where everybody who has an excess will drop it in that pool, and everybody is in need will extract it from the pool.
It's very interesting. And how do you think we can take this, to a further level in terms of, promoting the technology? We have a new law for renewable energy. It's not new that far. Actually, it's being issued in 2014, which encourages the building for or investment in renewable energy. It set 4 schemes. One of these schemes is what we call it a feed-in tariff scheme, where the grid is being announced a certain price. If you build a facility for renewable energy, the grid will be ready to purchase this energy for a long guaranteed period, so you ensure that a cash flow to your facilities. Part of the plan is basically, and also a Prime Minister decree has been issued with the, this tariff. Now we are in the second round for this tariff, and it includes the target 300 megawatt for a household, which is a small size system. Also, there is 2,000 megawatt for a medium size specific generating facilities for solar, and another 2,000 megawatt for wind. That is going on. I believe the first 3 contracts, which belongs to round 1, are almost ready to be signed, of a total capacity of 150 megawatt, and the other will come, I believe, maybe within this year. So now it's taking place. Many of public buildings now already have their own solar system on the top. Actually, I just, while reviewing a recent report, now we have around 45 megawatt of installed capacity of solar energy, and this is growing. Most of the companies which is working in this are now almost, they have a double size of their business. So this very strong growing kind of a business nowadays, and expected as we reach a kind of less volatility for the exchange rate, this business will be growing quite fast and become one of the leading businesses in Egypt. Yes, and mentioning that, President Sisi has instructed the new administrative capital buildings to be run using solar energy. Let's have a look at the upcoming report regarding this topic.
President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi instructed that administrative buildings in the new administrative capital should be run using solar power, which will boost Egypt's solar energy field, increasing the employment opportunities in the field and reduce the cost of solar energy equipment. The launch of the first current transformer aims at reducing the cost of producing energy via solar plants. The state places great importance of increasing the reliance on renewable energy. The Ministry of Electricity has made submit a significant amount of legislative amendments to allow the participation of the private sector in energy production projects for both conventional and renewable energy. He praised the active contribution of the private sector companies in the production of energy in Egypt. He pointed out that the private sector companies contributed 1,500 megawatts to the Electricity Ministry's urgent plan for 2015. The Renewable Energy Authority seeks to increase the proportion of local manufacturing in renewable energy projects to do more than 50%. The authority has augmented the grid by 220 megawatts produced by 13 wind turbines at Jebel Al Zayt station. An additional 220 megawatts is planned to be added by the end of July 2017.
Welcome back. You're still watching the Daily Debate, and we're joined now over the line with Dr. Yusuf Mazhar to be discussing more about this topic. And I would like to, at the beginning, to thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for calling.
So I'd like to ask you, we were just speaking about the solar energy part, and the Egyptian president has advised to have the new capital and the administrative capital to be running through the solar energy. How do you think this is impactful for the development of the city?
Well, look, let us just start so that our listeners can also be completely in the picture. The whole, let's say, episode we're going through now is the biggest change in the electrical network of Egypt. And ever since many years ago, when Germany also came in with its organizations to help in what we called at that time, it was Cairo North and Cairo South, which were two very big power stations, and they made a very big impact. Now we have 3 new normal power stations, which are going to go into the grid and which are going to be increasing the whole electricity of the country of 20%. And you know, nobody ever hears of 20%. It's usually 1% or 2%. Now, in the midst of all this, of course, solar energy takes a lead and takes a role. Of course, Egypt has got a wonderful situation with the number of hours of sunshine over the years. Also, the intensity of the sun are very, very, very high. So this makes a very good candidate for solar energy. So when you are setting something which is far away and which is the cost of traditional energy is going to be very expensive, solar energy is the answer. So we must not think that solar energy is the final solution to everything, because it's still a small percentage of the total energy requirements of any country. But it is certainly a step in the right direction, and it will not fail us, because there are also plans that many of the components of the solar energy equipment will be gradually made also in Egypt. So I think it's a very good step that whenever we have a new project, to insert a normal proportion or acceptable proportion of taking over the solar energy of the needed energy. I think that's the situation, and in a way answering your question.
Yes, sir, and with your experience and on the industrial spheres, I'd like to take also your view about this development of power plants, or the use of solar energies and the reduction of costs, and having those factories maybe and the industrial life more cost efficient. So how are these important for this aspect, given your experience?
Yes, well, it's no secret that when I started my career before going into the ministry many years back, I was working for an electrical industry multinational. And of course, that is the way where I spent 70 years of my life in that sector. So I think I can give a fair, let's say, evaluation of what's happening. Look, one thing we must also say is that Egypt is blessed with the arrival or the appearance of large quantities of natural gas. And if you take the productivity of energy, You start by the oil, which is gradually being replenished, and which is now getting scarcer everywhere and more difficult to get. And then you move on to gas. Gas is more efficient. It's very, very efficient, and also the turbines that are going to come into operation for the new power stations are also this twin cycle gas-powered turbine. So this is the best of the best. But we must also look at anything which is depleted oil. That means things that over the years, oil, of course, is a rare commodity. Gas, not for the moment, not for the future, will be in a very good situation. But we must not forget that we are blessed with this solar energy. And the sooner we get into it, and the sooner we get more and more stations, power energy stations or solar energy stations into the grid, we will be in a much better situation. And there's a plan in Egypt which says by the year 2030, we will have a considerable percentage of our main requirements from solar energy. So I think we're on the right track.
Yes. I'd like to thank you very much, Dr. Yusuf Mazhar, for joining us, and it has been very insightful. And
to tap on what
yes,
Dr. Mazhar mentioned, basically, actually, according to the Egypt strategy for 2035 energy strategy, we have several scenarios, but the scenarios which were already adopted by the government, we will have around 35% of our electricity generated will come from renewable energy by year 2035. Half of them will come from solar, PV solars. Around 1/4 will come from this percentage will come from CSP, because there is two main technologies for solar facilities as well as wind energy. And one of very important measure to reduce prices for renewable energy is to create what you call it economy of scale. So as you expand, you add more plant, you will have much cheaper, and also you will encourage local manufacturers to contribute, because now they will be sure that there is a steady market which is growing in the country, so they start to open factories to produce spare parts, as well as you introduce more for designing, for operation, for construction, which represent basically a sizable part of the investment itself.
Yes,
so this is one of the main targets of the energy strategy of Egypt.
Yes, and I'm glad you mentioned renewable energy, because this is, the future. And all of the developed countries are really working really hard on this. Even countries who has less, sun energy like what we have, and the solar energy, they are leveraging that.
And there is a very much important measure for renewable energy, because what we call it predictability. Basically, prices for a conventional energy, almost oil or gas, depends on what, even coal, kind of fuel which is being operated. This is a volatile price. So sometimes you have a higher price, you have a lower price, and normally this represents around 60% of the total cost of kilowatt hour. So your price for kilowatt hour is very much vulnerable to the change in prices of oil and gas. But for renewable energy, you do investment day one. So for a 20-year ahead, you know what is the price of your energy. So you will not be shocked with any kind of a turbulence for a price volatility for other kind of fuel supplies. So This is guarantee for consumers that for a very long period that you could guarantee a certain price for energy, which help much more predictability. Not to mention, for sure, environmental impact. So this is very much important, but I would like to say that the financial contribution for it is predictability, which is very much important.
Yeah, like I mentioned, because the main contributor to that energy is
solar and wind. Yeah. So exactly. It's a gift from God. Yeah.
Yes, and definitely the other aspects can be also predicted, like I mentioned, the maintenance aspect, the spare parts aspect, and you mentioned also that this can create industries or sectors that's working around this specific technology.
And this large market will enable to create a kind of a base which could help also in exporting.
Exactly.
By the way, Germany, when they want a very strong program for solar energy, many people say, why Germany is doing that? They don't have sufficient sun. But basically now, Germany will become one of the exporters of energy in a form of equipment for solar energy and other type of energy like wind energy. So To develop the technology and enhance the technology, enhance the science, you need to build plants in order to create such kind of cash flow for the developer in order to improve their designs. So Egypt has a chance to be a player in this field.
I think Germany, this is a model, to have this size of land, this size of population, and being able to have the solar energy and the energy in general, like you mentioned, to be exported as a service. That's really interesting to
Yes,
learn.
You
it's a
export
model.
energy in a different scheme.
Yes.
Not just an oil and gas, you export in form of equipment.
Yes. Speaking about renewable, one of the most important aspects of renewable energy is nuclear energy. How is this developing in Egypt? Because this has been, in plan for so many years, maybe decades too.
We call it alternative energy more
Yes.
than renewable, because still nuclear energy is using fossil fuel, a kind of a fuel
Just
which
part
comes
of,
from the land, from mines and things like this. Actually, Egypt, part of the strategy of Egypt is to have what we call it a diversification of supply. Diversification of supply means that the system or the pool of supply for electricity in Egypt should rely on different kind of a source. So if we have a turbulence in one supply source, we could rely on the other source. We don't get into a kind of a problem. So nuclear energy comes in that aspect in diversifying supply. Already there is a potential agreement. It's not yet signed, but it's a process is going on in order to build 4 plants of a total capacity of 4.8. So the whole are equivalent to almost 1 plant from the plants we were just talking about. But this has come, as I mentioned, as introduction for technology and technology transfer, as well as a kind of diversification of supply for renewable. One of the advantages of nuclear energy, similar to renewables, that fuel represents just 5% of the total cost of kilowatt hour. So any changes in fuel prices don't really impact the final cost of a kilowatt hour. So this has also helped in improving predictability for the prices for energy for some longer period. And basically France, when they adopted their program for nuclear energy, actually France has not affected by the what they call it, petroleum shock or energy problems, because they were relying more than 75% on electricity generated from nuclear energy. And this was a vision which is basically set back in the 60s in France. So, I mean, this is a kind of diversification. Second part is nuclear energy is not an emitting plant. So they don't contribute to the pollution or emission of CO2, which lead to global warming, like case of conventional power plant. Yes, there might be cons and pros, and many people are debating this. And this is why recently, last month, there was a kind of a public debate which is being launched by the Minister of Electricity to debate this project, and basically a kind of a public hearing for this kind of project. So it's very much important, because it's not just to build a plant, it's not just to improve the system, but also to improve the system setup, the transparency of the system, the accountability of the system, the communication of the system with customers to understand. So a lot around the system should be also developed.
Yes. And all of these, projects running through, phases of development, focused on energy, is definitely also contributing to the employment, because there is a lot of people that are going to be working on that sectors. If you can, from your experience, if you can shed some light on how is this going to be transformational for employment, and how is it going to be developing capacity in that area?
I would say in employment we have direct employment and indirect employment. In a direct employment, we have 2 kinds of employment. People employed in building these plants. Normally, as I mentioned, that these 3 projects now, around 20,000 people are working on the different aspects. But this is for a short time till these plants is being built. Then they come the operation and maintenance of these plants, which is basically you need to operate, you need a high caliber people in order to build, to operate and maintain this kind of plant. but also availability of electricity energy encourage investments. So you create an industries, so it will create an open chance for many, many other employments in other fields where people could find a job and being employed because electricity now is available for production means. Regarding this, it's very much important to have programs for building a kind of a capacity, internal capacity in the country. We have this capacity. Actually, as I mentioned, the power sector in Egypt is a very long-standing sector. It has many experienced people, but as expanding more and more faster, we need to add to this capacity. As technology is being developed, we need to upgrade our staff to be competent to this kind of new technologies. And this is why the agreement for building this plant include a kind of agreement for capacity building for 600 engineers and technicians who will be directly trained through kind of on-job training, as well as going to the facilities of the suppliers' facilities to be trained on this kind of technology. But also during the inauguration of the first phase, actual chairman of this company announced that this company will contribute in building facilities as well as supporting an existing facility to train 5,500 workers on a different levels of professions for operation, maintenance of other facilities, not just specifically for the existing plants.
This is interesting, but as we go for this, phase and very promising, the future, as you said, but again, there are existing challenges in terms of, leveraging energy, and we need the consumer also to understand the importance of saving energy. And this is part of a culture that has to be developed, and we shouldn't stop, compromising what we have today and looking at ways to save those energies. So what would you advise on that front?
It's very much important. Basically, as I mentioned, that there is a strategy for energy for Egypt and include very much important component on energy efficiency. Actually, it's not just making energy available. The challenge is to use this energy efficiently. First, to be competitive, because you couldn't export, because energy represents a kind of substantial part of production cost. Unless you're being efficient in using this energy, you will not be competitive at all. So it's very much important to conserve energy in industry. It's important to conserve energy in transportation and as well as in households. Actually, households, I might focus on it because it's very much, the pattern is very much similar. And it's not that challenging to save energy, but it's need a kind of a mindset. So it's very much important to have a kind of very strong communication campaign, continuous one, in order to make people aware about that. Using energy inefficiently means that we use our resources inefficient, and we allocate a lot of investment for we could save this investment to other sectors which could benefit, at least in the internal distribution. Instead of using energy for a household just to watch TV, I don't mean that people don't watch TV. I encourage them to, because it's a communication channel. But I mean just for misusing or leave a lamp is lit or light, close windows and open lights or whatever. Instead, you could use this electricity for a production facility where you can make a value added to the economy. So it's very much important.
Like you mentioned, this is a mindset.
Yes, it's a kind of a mindset. So it's very much important to be taken.
Dr. Hafiz Al-Salmawi, former director at the Electricity Regulatory Agency, I'd like to thank you very much for joining us. It has been very insightful and knowledgeable, a lot of knowledge that we have received from you today. It was really exciting to see you and a pleasure to see you once again.
Thank you very much for having me. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And with this, we come to the end of this edition of the Daily Debate. We'll see you next week. Goodbye.